Hello, my friends, once again, and welcome back to 15-Minute Free Thinking with me, Carpo. Whoop. I'm sure that will show up in the podcast as a creaking sound, which I was adjusting my generic, cheap, crappy mic stand that I use to hold up this very crappy microphone that I use. But you know what? It's okay, because it works. And the one thing I've learned is that if something works, there's no point in fretting about it. Fretting? Ooh, that was a perfect term. Actually, I just finished a fretboard. Look at this. This is, well, you can't see it if you're listening to the podcast. You can only see the video version. This is a fretboard made out of Bolivian rosewood, in which it has some inlays that I put. For those unaware, I've been building guitars. I haven't made a podcast in a couple weeks, and I'm trying to get back into the groove. I kind of took a little hiatus for the holidays. I made the choice that I was going to take 2022 a little more seriously, because the last couple of years have been up and down. They haven't been bad. I mean, we got some great vacations out of it. You know, when we went into lockdown, my wife and I hopped in the school. We have a school bus, so we jumped in, and it's converted into a RV. So we headed up north, went to all these places, spent like a month out there in the sticks, and had a great time. And so I understand the last 2 years has been stressful on a lot of people. And because of this, it's kind of difficult to really assess what's important. And this podcast and this video are going to relate to not necessarily what's important so much as I guess it is what's important, but when is it okay to be serious about things? You know, I have to say, I've met a lot of people in my life that really just don't take life too seriously, that can enjoy their time. Sometimes I see the time it really stands out the most to me is when it's in elderly populations, when there's somebody in their, late 60s or 70s who's totally embraced their white hair, and, they just go out and they enjoy themselves, whether it be kind of the hippy-dippy, crystal-wearing people, the Grateful Dead community, it doesn't matter. People who really have a happy disposition. But there's something there to be said about this underlying insecurity that we all have. And a lot of people who appear happy on the outside have underlying frustrations, but that's okay. It doesn't mean that they're angry people. But something I found is people who are too serious on the outside usually are pretty fun-loving people on the inside. People who are too fun-loving on the outside often are very serious on the inside and kind of play a game as if they don't care, as if life doesn't bother them, and it doesn't really matter. I went to an ICP concert maybe 10 years ago, maybe longer. That's Insane Clown Posse, mind you. Yeah, the clown guys. Completely whacked out dudes who throw soda pop all over the audience, and it became, I don't know, it was kind of a phase in my life. My brother introduced me to them, and I started, listening, and I loved the beats. They sing about some of the most vile shit. And I don't take it too seriously. I don't take it as if they're actually serious about these things. And I thought about this before I made this video, because I realized that the same thing with Prof. I'm going to give you an example. Prof is a new rap artist that I've been listening to over the last year, maybe 2 years now. My friend introduced me to, and the guy is awesome. He's very active on his YouTube channel. He's a nice guy. He actually responds in the comments and in the discussions, and he does live casts. The guy has fun, but he raps about things like bodies, or the same kind of shit that you would hear coming out of Eminem's mouth. I would say he's a little more, not more succinct about it, but the point being, you'd have to listen to him to understand. When I first listened, I took it as a literal, just, you never know when you hear a rapper, does he really mean what he's saying? I think one of the most absurd things in rap is when you hear a rapper rapping about killing people and then he acts like he's serious. Even if he is, I don't want to listen to your bullshit. But I'm getting off topic. The main point of bringing up music is that people rap and rock about things that necessarily they haven't experienced themselves. Even the Grateful Dead talking about a guy shooting his uncle, right? It's just part of the process. audiences can celebrate that and they can sing along and they can go, yeah, I killed my uncle. They don't actually think the band did that. But from the outside, it seems like these people are violent. It takes me back to the 80s with the PMRC. I don't recall the actual what it stood for. It was, I believe, the Parents Musical Record Coalition or something, where they wanted to ban bands like, you know, put on. This is where the parental advisory label come from. Twisted Sister, Slayer, even Prince. So, for example, with Twisted Sister, it was talking about death or, you know, darkness or whatever it might be. For Slayer, it would be they're Satanists. They call it the Satanic Panic back in the 70s and 80s. And then there was Prince, who talked about sex all the time. And now I have to pause my podcast to let my dog out because I don't have a moment of peace in this house. Go on. Go on. It's impossible. I was going to say my kids are at school for a couple hours. I was like, I'll make a video while I have a couple hours, but there's always something. And you got to be able to laugh at it. So anyhow, to get to the point here is that many times we just totally misunderstand how serious other people are, but really, what is worth being serious about? First of all, let's get that out of the way. Personal and family issues or friendship, when you have something you have to patch or mend, or you have a certain feeling about something, you want to explain it to someone, it's worth being serious. When it's business related, when you're trying to talk to your boss or your employees or something, yeah, you have to be able to be serious about business and getting things done when it comes to making sure that you're very, let's just say that you've covered all the bases, look people in the eye and tell them this is, you know, what we need to do for this job or whatever it may be. Then there is, besides business and then personal, there's emotional needs and boundaries. And I think this is very often overlooked. Often when, very few times that I'm accused of being too serious, it's often when I'm setting my boundaries and telling people, hey, this is how I feel about things. If you don't like it, tough shit. I've learned that that's extremely important. It could be anything from somebody showing up at my house out of the blue, or, you know, where I'm not the kind of person who, I'm always honest about how I feel in situations because I feel like that betters my future. It improves the likelihood. Like, if somebody that I'm not quite sure about shows up at my house out of the blue, I might tell them, hey, next time call me, please. A lot of people might be like, oh, it's okay, you can come anytime. And I'm like, I'm the guy who says, no, I'm not. So, at any rate, those are the things to be serious about. Your boundaries, your emotions, your personal life, your family life, and your business. Beyond that, don't worry about what other people fucking think. Strangers on the internet, the bullshit that they try to pull, telling you that you should think this way or you should think that way. People get really pulled into arguments and trolling and, you know, but something's changed today. Something that has really, I don't really know how to define it, but I would just call it the victimhood and the virtue signaling, which even 2 or 3 years ago, I didn't quite see in the same light that I do now. I could see that a lot of people wanted to virtue signal, and I'm not talking about just the people on the far left, because often when people talk about virtue signaling, they're talking about, oh, the far left liberals and the extremists who are obsessed with climate change or obsessed with how they eat, or vegans, this kind of shit. No, this has come from the right as well. Christian virtue signaling has always been a far right extreme position where people say we want churches and we want Bibles taught in our schools and we want our kids to grow up with God in their life. That's the same thing. It's really no different at all to tell the schools they should have, let's say, teach religion than to tell the schools they should teach racism. It's the same thing. They're both irrelevant to a school and to what kids need to learn. They're things that can be taught by parents. But now something has changed that has really put a completely different spin on this. Instead of just the usual things that we were, divided on or that were politicized, things like, religion, politics. Now it's people are dead serious about health and science and nature. And What I mean by that is we should be. We should be focused on our health. We should be focused on science. We should be focused on nature. But it's all politicized and greenwashed. If you're not familiar with greenwashing, it's this idea that, for example, BP can come out and say, oh, we respect green energy and we're trying for a better, cleaner future, right after a giant oil spill in the Gulf. Greenwashing is a company pretending like they give a shit about the world just so they can make more money by selling to more people who think that they care about them, because really they answer to the shareholders. And that's just a fact. I mean, there really aren't any large corporations that are actually taking initiatives towards being better companies unless there's some profit to be made. Bottom line is money. You can talk to any of them. It's always money. It's the shareholders that matter the most. But not just greenwashing. Now we are like health washing things. Virtue washed, you might call it. This idea that only a segment of the population should be allowed to travel freely or go into places of business because they have the right vaccine card, or that mandates should be acceptable because A, B, and C, that we fear what we don't understand, and that we as a society are too damn lazy to do our own research, too damn lazy to listen to all the different points of view, and therefore take a virtue signaling position which just says, I'm right, you're wrong, everything you believe is bullshit, you're all conspiracy theorists, or you're all religious fanatics, or you're all politically fucked on the left or the right, whatever it might be. Virtue washed. The idea that people are afraid to even listen to each other. And I would say it's akin to saying a person, these days, for a left or a right extreme person to listen to the other side and to actually read and listen and absorb information that they have for their feelings and their ideas is about as unlikely as Tipper Gore going and listening to a Twisted Sister album in order to get a better idea of what the lyrics mean. When I was a kid, I thought maybe they were talking about, horrible things too. Until I grew up, and even as a teenager, I learned that Megadeth, the band, spent most of their time singing about stopping nuclear war and to protecting the vulnerable, to helping the weak. That's what their whole album, Rust in Peace, was about. Had a song called Hangar 18. It was all about space. There was a certain time in the 80s, but the point was that there was a major nuclear threat going on in the 80s, kind of the end of the Cold War. Who the hell is talking about that except for heavy metal bands? But I digress. The point being that these are the musicians and the bands that actually tackle these subjects because they had that intensity behind them. That they could rock out, they could play heavy metal, and it felt powerful and allowed them to carry powerful ideals. Anti-war songs, that works fine with an acoustic guitar, but it's just not the same. So the point being that the PMRC, Tipper Gore, all that bullshit, they were wrong. And Tipper Gore was wrong about the intention of the music or the meaning behind the music or what it would do to the kids, just like the Satanic Panic was a failure. Which, just like her husband, Al Gore, also failed to really convey to the public his beliefs about climate change. And that's a perfect transition, which was not intended. I wanted to talk about the PMRC, but climate change is a perfect example. There are people out there who say, you should do this and you should do that, and we need to reduce our use. A good example was somebody who said they don't like to use resin because they don't like that it's plastic and it's damaging to the environment. I relate to this. But I also say, well, if you're doing something artistic, we should not hold back what we do in our lives if it adds a minute or minimal amount of waste to the world, when it adds a huge amount of satisfaction to our lives. And we have to weigh that option. No, you don't want to drink, 10 plastic cartons of some juice that, is full of sugar and then just throw them all in the garbage and say, oh man, that was wasteful. That's different than putting a thin coating of resin on like a piece of jewelry or, like I said, a fretboard. These things we have to weigh everything. And we're looking at everything through the lens of what we're told, what's important. Virtue signaling. Identity politics. Identity politics are where we're at now. I refuse to buy into it. And by refusing to buy into it, And refusing to take a side, you pull yourself out of what some people would call, I guess, the matrix. I hate using that analogy, but I'm not talking about some fake reality we're living in, or an AI, or a simulation, but rather the real reality we live in, but the fact that each of our brains perceives things differently. When I look through my eyeballs at even myself in the camera here, or I look at my microphone, I have all kinds of different thoughts at once about the past experiences I've had with the microphone and the camera, with where I'm sitting, the room around me. A different person sitting here would have a completely different experience, even talking about the same topic. And that's why life is fascinating. I mean, we're in a weird time where we're starting to see through a lot of the bullshit we believed in the past, but we're really trying to hang on to it. An example would be the Western culture's fascination with late capitalism, I guess, where we're at right now, where we've already acknowledged that capitalism isn't bringing the successes and happiness that we really want in our lives. It's not increasing personal happiness or satisfaction in order to have more cheap and free stuff. And yet we're still living in a denial. It's kind of like a Christian when they're at the very tail end of their beliefs, and they're just hanging on because it's what they've always known. And in the bottom of their heart, they really believe that it's not true, but they hang on to it for the sake of that comfort and that connection. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. 5-10 years ago, I would have said that's a bad thing. If you asked me 10 years ago, I would say all Christians, all Muslims should abandon their religion and find some spiritual truth that works, that isn't separatist. But tribalism seems to be natural. It seems that people want to divide themselves into different tribes. And I'm not sure what to think about that or what to do about that in my own life. But being in the middle is not comfortable, because I share many left and right views. I've been accused of being a conservative by a bunch of people in the past just by having one opinion about a person or an idea. And I've also been accused of being a liberal by 90% of the people, just because of my feelings about protecting others, helping your neighbor, the fact that I do believe that we could fund schools better, not with more money, but by better bureaucracy. And I'm no expert. I don't know all the details or how to handle these things. I feel like society is spinning its wheels right now. And I say society meaning mostly Western society, the idea that we're trying to continue progress instead of being comfortable with what we have. You cannot continually grow. When you just think of it on a very basic level, anything on earth that continuously grows without stopping, what do you call that? It's a cancer or an invasive species. And we need to ease back. And I'm not on that extreme mindset of eliminate humans and start over, but there's part of me that realizes that's going to happen anyway. That one major solar flare or one impact from a celestial ball of rock, I mean, something the size of my block, the neighborhood block I live on, could actually change life on Earth. Something that small when it hits. It's amazing to think that just something like a half mile across could just annihilate life as we know it on this planet. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. And when they think about an impact, they think of this giant meteor that's 100 miles across. No, they're small. Even a mile across would be horrendous for life on Earth. But I'm not going to go there. That's not the point here. The point is we are always in danger. It could be 1,000 years or 1,000,000 years from now before anything that big hits. But eventually, we are going to destroy ourselves because of our own arrogance. The movie on Netflix that I watched a few weeks back, it was called Don't Look Up. And I'm sure a lot of you have already seen it. There's going to be people who have said, oh yeah, I've seen it. And there's going to be people who have said, I don't watch TV. I never watch TV shows. TV shows still carry some value. Not a lot. But Don't Look Up has Leonardo DiCaprio and a couple other people in it. And it's basically some scientists who discover a meteor is coming that is going to impact, or whatever it is. I think it was a comet, actually, that's going to hit the Earth. And it's going to destroy life on Earth, that everyone's going to die. And the whole movie is just comical. It's based on this idea that, they bring it to the attention of the public, but even when they're in the media, they're just ignored. There's the main people who are being interviewed before them or some trendy, rock band or something. Like, the whole idea is it's a perfect metaphor for the fact that nobody gives a fuck about what's going on unless it fits in with their own narrative, and that those who, let's say, are extremely far right, who don't believe in any climate change, who have heard that it's a hoax, they're not going to believe that the Earth is even changing at all, because they're so tied into what they believe that even if climate change is actually induced by natural causes, they'll still deny it. Even when storms are increasing and tornadoes take their own house out and hurricanes become more prevalent, they will still ignore it. But let me say, before anybody gets frustrated out there saying, oh, that's not happening, the truth is it's not happening. Many of the things, this brings me back to Al Gore, many of the things I talked about earlier with Al Gore and his prediction with, an inconvenient truth. Yes, the climate is always changing, but if you look at the data, you'll find that actually humans may not contribute as much as we realize. From what I understand, the volcanic eruption the other day down in Tonga, they said that might set us back 5 years in emissions. In other words, the aerosol shot out from that one volcano will cool the Earth so much that it will negate emissions for several years from all the automobiles and factories, I believe. I don't know the details. The whole thing is none of us really know the details, and we are so hung up on it that we become serious about it, as if we know what's going on. So Don't Look Up is a great critique. I can't say that it was accurate in the sense that climate change is as big of a danger as they say. May or may not be, and we'll find out. But here we are. We're in a day and age where people celebrate things like Bitcoin, Ethereum, and one of my favorite new ones, NFTs, or non-fungible tokens. Now, I'm not going to go into the details of these because it's like attacking a band. Like, if you attack an idea like this, it's like attacking somebody's favorite rock group, or, how dare you talk bad about NFTs or Bitcoin. I think that Bitcoin is a big pyramid scheme that's going to collapse completely. I don't think it's the answer from the problem, because it's still run by people who have influence and money. And I think that NFTs are complete garbage. It's basically little pictures that people are bidding on. It allows rich people to buy and sell huge, transferring huge amounts of wealth, like the modern art, where you go into a gallery and there's an entire painting of just red. There's white ones, there's red ones, there's red with a blue stripe and a yellow stripe. Like, these are paintings that are considered modern art, but to me, it tells me something about society. I know other people will disagree with me and say, no, dude, you don't know what you're talking about. You just can't see what they really mean and what they really are. And I would like to say, I agree, that's your opinion, but no, that's bullshit. A painting, a canvas with just white or just red on it with a stripe is bullshit. It's not art. It's not beneficial in any way, any more than a little picture of a monkey or a picture of a sunshine in a digital form that you buy for millions of dollars. It's dumb. It's dumb, and it's showing how bad we have lost our way. We are so desperate to hang on to the future and something new and something great that we're willing to buy digital pictures. But I digress again. We are consumers. We are consumers, not experiencers of wisdom. Being consumers is different than being experiencers. We need to begin to experience again. We buy products that we know suck. Why? Well, because sometimes they're the only option. In fact, when you go online to buy something, or you go to the store to buy something, you're looking through the products and you're thinking, I wonder what the reviews are like on this. Think about it. The fact that you even have to consider looking at bad reviews shows that shitty products are allowed to flourish and they end up being the most popular sellers. But here's the thing. People buy them and say, oh, that's crappy, but I bought two just in case. So when it goes out, like a home stereo these days, you have to spend so much more than you ever did in the past, even though some of the early stereos, I still use vintage stuff. But at any rate, we buy shit that we know is going to fall apart. We vote for politicians we know will be thrown out in 4 years. We start businesses that we know will become irrelevant in time. We send our kids off to school knowing that by the time they're graduating from high school, kids in grade school today, will have nothing like the world we live in today. And we start to wonder, what's the point? And we become cynical. Don't let yourself become cynical. I can laugh at things. I've been accused many times of being cynical, but I'm actually, I consider myself a pretty happy person. You know, and if I fall down a little bit, I just try to get right back up. But we do celebrate our servitude. I just want to mention this. It's something that we fought for so many centuries to overcome. You know, think of the French Revolution and, you know, beheadings of kings and queens and the fact that that was even left in history because you can't hide certain things. You think about all the times there were uprisings and rebellions against governments, against, you know, corporate interests in today's world, but that they are just kind of negated and ignored in history because they go against this, quote, system that we all inhabit. I know, sounds crazy. People think the system is great, that it's bringing us happiness, but I don't see it. I see people arguing over the stupidest shit. I see people who are willing to leave other people in their homes and not allow them to travel, or to even throw them in jail because they choose not to take a vaccine or a certain medical procedure. People are being denied heart transplants and organ transplants. There's one guy, let me give you an example, because this is not about medicine here, but that's part of the issue. People are so divided over these things. There was a guy who had a major heart problem in which he would have these, I don't know the actual condition, but like arrhythmia and several problems. So he was reluctant to get the vaccine for COVID because he didn't want to harm his heart, because he read that myocarditis and pericarditis are common as side effects. And since he already had these as part of his health condition and he was waiting for a transplant, he said he would be better off probably not getting the shot. And as it came, they denied him a heart transplant. And I thought about this. I thought, here's a person who's doing what's best for him. He's not choosing this because he's a conspiracy theorist or a freak. He's doing it because of the data relating to his situation. But he's being treated like a number. And this is nothing different. It's always been this way. You've been a subject in the past. But we deserve better in today's world. We deserve better as individuals and as a society. We deserve the ability to choose for ourselves without being ridiculed. And that's why people seem to be so serious now. It's that politics have become, let me just put it this way. There are two types of people out there when it comes to information, when it comes to politics and science. There are the people out there who know that something's fishy and they don't agree with other people. And they're being cast aside and ostracized, like doctors and scientists, epidemiologists, who have their own opinions on what we should do. And they're just being thrown to the wayside. And they're serious because they're being ignored. Then there are people on the other side who are serious because what they've been told has convinced them so much that what they believe is right about many different topics. This would be kind of like the way that, don't want to turn it into a religious thing, I'll leave that out. But the idea that the people who tend to be the most serious and get the most frustrated and angry are often the ones who really have no data to back up their claims, their beliefs, or their ideals. And we're living in a day and age where data is crucial. Because 100 years ago, you could say, well, I just believe in God, and that's the way it is, and you can't prove me wrong. I mean, they couldn't. And today, they still can't, because the data's not there. But if a person believed a certain thing about atoms or how molecules combined 100 years ago, well, now the science can show us how that works to an extent. But my point being that it's kind of like science as an experiment. Mix two chemicals, they either explode or don't explode, right? And we're living in a time where you can say, well, mix these and it'll be just fine. And I don't feel like people give a shit anymore about the truth. And that's okay. That's the world we live in. Now I got to let my dog in again, so I have to pause the podcast again. All right. What, Luz? Come on. Lay down. You lay down. Lay down, I'm recording. Good girl. I love my doggy, but man, she can be a nuisance, I'll tell you. So I suppose that concludes my podcast for today, and I appreciate you all coming along. For what it's worth, I should kind of sum up the whole point of this podcast at the end. Try to. And I got to go pick up my son in 10 minutes, so I better go. Saying people take things too seriously. I listen to all kinds of rap where the lyrics don't necessarily convey things I support, but I know it's done in jest and it's a joke, and it's okay to joke about things that are not comfortable. And this is where I feel like we're losing our way, because comedy, people like Dave Chappelle being ridiculed, people like Joe Rogan. Neil Young the other day said something about how if they don't remove Joe Rogan from Spotify, he wants all his music pulled from Spotify. So Spotify pulled all of Neil Young's music. And I thought that was hilarious. All because Joe allows people to talk about certain topics others don't want to hear because they think it's, quote, damaging or harmful to society. Well, tough fucking shit. That's the world we live in. A lot of things you may feel are damaging or harmful, but ignorance is probably the most harmful thing we have right now. So being open with dialect and dialogue is the most crucial thing now. So let people say what they're going to say, and say what you're going to say, and leave it at that. Don't take it personal. People have different opinions. It doesn't affect your personal life that another person believes something different. So that aside, when is it important to be serious? Like I said before, when it's personal or family related, when you're trying to share your boundaries with people, say do or don't do this because these things bother me so you can not deal with that again in the future. In other words, a small amount of controversy at a moment to overcome more of that in the future. Then your emotional needs and your business, whatever you do when you're talking with customers or an employer. Other than that, have fun. You know, I come across as serious in my videos, but I'm a joker. In my mind, I'm always laughing at shit. Don't be afraid to like what you like, just because other people don't like it. Don't be afraid to change your mind because you want to fit into a certain group. Don't buy shitty products just because you're part of the system and you feel you need to keep buying shitty products. Western culture, late capitalism, don't look up Bitcoin. I guess I've covered it all. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you all next time. This has been naturally brought to you by nature. I feel it's important to always include some sort of a sponsor, since other people are willing to sponsor companies that are complete shit, like Raycon headphones or some kind of a crappy online service. The world sells out. I don't take it too seriously. But I would always like to sponsor nature in my videos because nature's cool as fuck. I love it. Yeah, going out in the woods. Learn to laugh, my friends. I'll talk to y'all next time. Be well. Take care of each other. Thanks for coming along.